Joining us in the studio today is a good friend of the program. We got Joe Eppel from Xapo Bank. Joe, how are you this morning? Always a pleasure seeing your shining face.
Morning, Hank. Always a pleasure to see your face too. Doing very well this morning. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing a little better now, my friend. We got a lot to talk about this morning. In our first story, we mentioned, traders are preparing for a Bitcoin price to skyrocket potentially by the end of the year. They're saying even potentially 250K, thanks to the Fed flooding the market with even more cash. What's your take? Do you think that the Fed's liquidity party is really the catalyst for this, or are we just witnessing another bubble in the making? What are your thoughts, friend?
Oh man, well, the Fed's doing what the Fed does best, which is making more money. And as you said, very rightly, producing more money leads to that money being worth less over time. It's inflationary, right? Ultimately, that's usually good for assets like Bitcoin, which love a bunch of extra money floating around the system, and people who are worried about that inflationary aspect of the US federal policy will hopefully be looking for something to hedge against. And Bitcoin is the perfect example of an asset which is deflationary and is only going to increase in value compared to an inflationary system such as the US dollar. So I think it's a positive sign. I think we're due some good news, and let's see what happens at the Fed meeting. I think it's later. Is it today or tomorrow in the US?
Yeah, it's later this afternoon. We'll be seeing if there's some interest rate cuts. So this morning, the market seems pretty bullish on it, as everything seems to be kind of in the green, which is usually a good sign. But Jerome Powell has tricked us before, so I think we should all be treading with caution until the announcement is actually out this afternoon. And as we experienced back in the old COVID days, God, that was a long time ago now. Remember, like it was just yesterday. The government started pumping money into the system, and Bitcoin responded very favorably, as that tends to weaken the dollar and kind of increase Bitcoin's importance on a global scale. How does Xapo Bank help people make sense of all of this? Is Bitcoin the solid investment here, or is it just the shiny distraction while the dollar is getting watered down by the Fed?
That's a great question, Hank, and I think to your COVID point, many of us have potentially even suppressed those memories. But the Stimmy bull run was a great moment, and I think we all remember that fondly. At Xapo Bank, look, we are the place where we believe in Bitcoin as the future of your financial freedom and the ability for you to grow your wealth securely. And we provide the products and the services and the support for you to do just that. I think there's a lot of noise out there in the crypto space. There's a lot of meme coins. There's a lot of altcoins, many of which, and this is not financial advice, are probably not going to be your ticket to the gravy train. There's a lot of scams out there. Bitcoin, though, the original, tried and tested. Xapo has been in the space since 2013. And throughout that time, we have custodied and enabled thousands of users from all over the world to keep their Bitcoin safe, to grow their Bitcoin. And very recently, as I'm sure many of our listeners will have heard, enabled users and members to actually take a loan out against the value of their Bitcoin, as opposed to having to sell it. I mean, the last thing any of us want to do, if Bitcoin's going to be 250K by the end of the year, the last thing you want to do is sell any of it right now just because you need to pay for something. So Xapo Bank, we're going to keep your Bitcoin as safe as it could possibly be, and we're going to give utility to that Bitcoin at the same time. You can take a loan out against it, you can earn interest on it, or you can spend it if you really need to using one of our beautiful metal debit cards. So that's what Xapo is, that's what we do. And the cherry on the cake is that if you need some help, if the world of crypto, the world of Bitcoin is super confusing, you have your own account manager who's dedicated to you, who can help you understand exactly what it is that Xapo can actually do for you in your particular set of circumstances.
Yeah, you guys are an absolute saving grace, because I don't want anyone laying a finger on my Bitcoin. It kind of reminds me of that old Simpsons thing where they were partnered with Butterfinger back in the day. It was never lay a finger on my Butterfinger. So maybe Xapo needs to adopt a never lay a finger on my Bitcoin, but we'll figure out a way to make that rhyme a little better. So if we're seeing another wave of liquidity coming into Bitcoin, is there any chance that you think we're heading for a crash when all of this liquidity music stops? And as a product manager in crypto, how does Xapo Bank prepare customers for the roller coaster that could be happening once a Fed-driven Bitcoin boom cools off from some of this liquidity no longer being pumped into the market?
Yeah, it's another great question. So I mean, I think as we've seen historically, there's a correlation between increased money supply and increased Bitcoin price. If the Fed does go back into its quantitative easing, which those money printers do love to go burr and speed up, then we could very well be in for a good ride. And crypto bull runs are followed by bear markets, and that means that you have to be strong and you have to have your Bitcoin somewhere where it is safe, where it is not going to be easily forgotten or lost, and ideally where it can also be easily accessed by anyone else in the event of you no longer being there, that you dedicate a person to receive those funds, such as you can with Xapo and our beneficiaries feature. In terms of how we prepare our users and our members for the bull market and for the following winters that can come, it all comes down from our perspective to security and the longer term vision. You need to understand that Bitcoin as an asset has generally outperformed all other asset classes. It's something that we're in for the long haul. If you zoom out, if you get out of the day-to-day price fluctuations, it's moving up and to the right. And that means you need to keep it somewhere where it's safe and where you're not the single point of failure, and also, where you're not just keeping your money sitting on an exchange. So we advise all of our members, this is the time to enable your two-factor authentication. This is the time to make sure you have a beneficiary set up. This is the time to make sure that you are checking for our anti-phishing code and all of our communications with you. Make sure that, you aren't going to accidentally fall prey to some kind of scam. And if you have any doubts, any questions about anything, always reach out to our wonderful AM team or our account support team, who will be able to guide you and give you the best possible advice in your circumstances.
Absolutely. To your point, you said people have to zoom out when they look at Bitcoin, because people are like, oh, it's really crazy. It's a roller coaster. It's not particularly stable. But when you zoom out, it's incredibly stable. And it's shown that over time. And it's even more than stable. It appreciates at a rate unlike many things we've ever seen in the history of mankind. So it's nice to know that you guys not only are making it more stable from a security standpoint, but you're giving your clients the view that, like, listen, zoom out on this. This is exactly what it was always meant to be, a safe haven asset. So we appreciate you bringing that up. And speaking of stable, there's a new stablecoin bill brewing in Washington, and with the government stepping in to try and regulate them. Do you think that this is the government finally getting serious about crypto, or is it just another way to keep the dollar firmly in control while pretending to play nice with decentralization?
It's a great one. It's probably a bit of both, to be honest, Hank. I reckon there's definitely people in the US government who are worried about the dollar losing its global status as a reserve currency. And certainly with the massive explosion of stablecoins and stablecoin company acquisitions and so on. I mean, many people have said that the last few months have really been like the era of the stablecoin. I think it's a great opportunity for the US to take a leading role in trying to regulate this industry. And I know its regulation is something we feel, lots of different emotions about, right? Certainly not everyone in the crypto industry is pro-regulation, but I do think that if we are talking about using Bitcoin as a strategic national reserve, if we're talking about cryptocurrencies being part of ETFs, we are acknowledging that there will have to be some form of government regulation of these financial instruments. Otherwise, it will continue to be the Wild West of IPOs and meme coins, which absolutely governments can't expose necessarily everyone to through formal financial institutions. So I think there's always going to be those in the space who are very against regulation. And there's always going to be those in government who are looking to leverage regulation to ensure that their currency retains whatever dominance or hegemony that it has. From my perspective, Xapo is a regulated bank. We've got a banking license, we've got a VASP license, and we've always believed that being fully regulated is in fact a real sales value add, because it shows that our users and our members are protected by legislation beyond what we have in our terms and conditions. There is a government entity that you can go to and say, hey, these guys aren't playing by the rules that they set or that you set. And as a result, they have recourse. And I think that is a very important thing as we look at the crypto industry maturing and evolving into a true alternate financial system.
Well put, Joe. Well put. Stay put. I want you to stay put with me for a second. We got another story. I'm going to bring you back here in just a second. Musk, everyone's favorite or least favorite tech mogul, is back at it again, this time taking aim at the US government and its magic money computers. That sounds like something my grandmother would say. And yeah, you read that right. That's exactly what he said. Musk is claiming that certain federal departments like Treasury and Defense are using computers that can magically create money out of thin air. Awesome. According to Musk, these computers aren't exactly firing on all cylinders, though, as apparently they're sending payments with no explanation, no payment codes, just money flying out the door for no real apparent reason. Now, Musk, ever the skeptic, is calling it magic money and pointing out that these computers aren't even getting their numbers right most of the time. Well, that doesn't sound good. Or in other words, the government's financial system might be even more chaotic than we initially thought. Musk's solution? It's pretty simple, and it's Bitcoin, baby. Musk is essentially saying that BTC is the answer to all this magical money printing, because unlike fiat, Bitcoin's supply is capped at 21 million coins. No more printing out money at will. Now, Bitcoin's decentralized nature is the ultimate hedge against inflation and government-driven devaluation of currencies. So while Musk might be poking fun at government inefficiencies, he's making a serious point about how Bitcoin offers a more stable and transparent alternative to the chaos of traditional financial systems. Or in short, Musk's out here calling out government waste and reminding us that the future is decentralized. And he's sticking to that story no matter what. So, Joe, we're bringing you back here, buddy. Elon is out here calling the government's financial system a joke, claiming it's got magic money computers, that they are printing cash for no reason at all. If that's true, what's the crypto world's role in fixing this? Is Bitcoin the grown-up solution to all these government mistakes, or just another way to make money from the chaos? What do you think?
That's a great one. And look, I mean, I think the fact that magic money machines exist is maybe not super surprising. We hear fancy terms like quantitative easing and increase of money supply. It's not like we are mining new gold and therefore printing more money. We are long past those days, right? So, of course, money that is produced into the system by the Fed is being generated somewhere. And the fact that these machines exist and aren't necessarily super well, tracked or regulated is definitely a worrying sign that the United States is sitting on a little bit of a house of cards. I have a little souvenir here from my childhood. It's kind of showing up there. It's a $10 billion note from where I grew up in Zimbabwe. And that's what happens when governments are allowed to print as much money as they want, is your currency suffers from inflation, and it gets to the point of hyperinflation, and then money becomes meaningless and you lose all of your wealth. And ultimately, Bitcoin was invented specifically so that centralized control and the ability to mass produce as much money as you want wouldn't be doable by a single individual or a single, politician. And I think this is exactly what Bitcoin fixes, right? Absolutely, though, it's also an opportunity for people who hold Bitcoin to have that money, be worth a lot more in the inflationary fiat world, because by its very nature, it's always going to remain those 21 million coins, and fiat is going to continue to increase exponentially. Of course, Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot more over time. Hashtag not financial advice. So I would say bit of both, Hank.
Yeah, and Joe, I got to say, a $10 billion note, I had no idea you were floating in that kind of cash. This unfortunately kind of changes things between us a little bit. Yeah. Now, Musk is claiming that the U.S. government's financial system is an absolute mess, and that payments are flying out the door like my mother on a shopping spree with no credit limit. She really has a problem. Now, if Bitcoin is still the antidote to all of this, or the antidote, excuse me, how does Xapo Bank balance the potential for decentralization with the need for financial stability? And do we really trust Bitcoin to replace the U.S. dollar, or is that just asking for a meltdown in and of itself?
A lot of questions there, Hank. I mean, I think what Xapo does is it says, look, Bitcoin is this incredible technology, and it's an incredible technology that enables you to achieve that financial freedom and that independence from whatever economy in whatever country you live in. We're talking a lot about the United States, which is, of course, the biggest economy in the world and a very well regulated, and one in which your US dollars generally, of course, there's been inflation, but we're not talking about like hundreds and thousands of percents of inflation, right? Things have devalued, but not to the extent where people have lost everything. When we look at places like Argentina, when we look at places like Zimbabwe, when we look at other countries experiencing high degrees of inflation, it's really a life-changing thing, and it can happen in the space of weeks and months. What Xapo is saying is Bitcoin is the, as you said, antidote to this environment. But at the same time, it's a technology that maybe not everybody in the world has the technical sophistication to self-host or to self-custody and to therefore have direct control over that Bitcoin. That being said, there are a lot of solutions out there, and a lot of them are third parties. And the question is, do you trust all of these random third parties with your Bitcoin? How do you know who you can trust and who you can't trust? And we say, well, guys, you can trust us because we've been around since 2013. At what point we custodied over 1 million Bitcoin. We are also the entity that is one of the first fully regulated crypto banks and VASP at the same time. We are going to ensure that at all times we're compliant with those regulations that make sure that we don't have any direct control over your funds. So we say, take advantage of the situation whereby we provide these services that will allow you to protect your wealth, and give us a call. Come and join up and see if we can help you protect against these inflationary pressures that the world is facing. In terms of Bitcoin replacing the US dollar, I think that is a question above my pay grade, but I do think if we start to see Bitcoin increasing in value astronomically, if we start to see a lot more sovereign wealth funds, a lot more institutions putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and at the same time we see inflationary pressure on the US economy, maybe it will become more of an alternative than it currently is today for your average person on the street. But yeah, that's just my 10 cents.
I love hearing your 10 cents, Joe. And you, my friend, are always an absolute wealth of knowledge and a safe haven for my Bitcoin. So I appreciate you, and I certainly appreciate all you guys over at Xapo. That, I know you got to get going, so we're going to wrap up with you today. But always, Joe, thank you so much for your time, and we're excited to see you very, very soon, my friend. Always a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Ang. Bye.